Welcome. Today I'm going to show you how we designed and made these CNC carvings that go on front of the pulpit and the altar. This is the pulpit carving, and this is the altar carving. Now these are carved on CNC in cherry, and so I'm going to go through how I did the design, what the challenges were, and how we ended up with these pieces. These are finished with 2 coats of shellac, brushed in and sanded, and then 2 coats of lacquer. And they're not complete, but this is ready for any further work that I may do on them. So, let's get started. Here's a rendering of the pulpit design, and it was done on Design CAD. And I took the rendering of the carving from Aspire and turned that into a JPEG that then became texture that I could lay onto the model in Design CAD. And that's what you're seeing. Now, making that's a whole nother story. So I thought of a lot of different ways of doing this, but the one that made the most sense was to carve this on the CNC similarly to the way you carve a bowl. That is, with the bottom being rounded and the inside being rounded, since the front of the pulpit and the altar, for that matter, are curved. And so I'm going to show you how that was done. Here's the model of the carving that's on the front of the pulpit in Aspire, and you can see that it is flat. And that's how I wanted it to make a rendering that I could then apply to the front of the pulpit model in Design CAD. So I had to figure out how to make that curved. So I made this new file, and you can see here that it has a curve on the front and the back. And the way I did that was to use the actual curvature of the front of the pulpit and make a plane that is curved that would become the back of the model here, and then lay the model I had made onto that curved surface to end up getting a curved piece that could be carved two-sided. And so this is what this is. And if I show you here how the carving was actually done, and there you can see all the tool paths for the front of the piece, and a simulation of the carving. And you can see that right now, because I only carved the front, this is still going to be a flat piece on the back, because I didn't carve the back yet, but you can see how the front is curved. So now it's a matter of flipping this over and carving the back, which is just simply a single tool path with a 1/2-inch bit that carves this. And now with that back fully carved, I'll go ahead and get rid of the excess pieces here. And you can see that the whole, if I can get this thing to twist right, you can see that the whole thing has a curved back and a curved front. So if I can carve this successfully, I can then apply this with glue to the front of the pulpit. Okay, now what I had to figure out is how to fit this thing onto my spoil board, because my machine only has a 24-inch wide by 18-inch tall spoil board. So I decided to cut this into 2 pieces, a top piece and a bottom piece, and then I'd glue them together. So here's the top piece, and you can see those little white rectangles are tabs that hold the waste to the model as I cut through the whole thing so everything doesn't go flying. And you can see I've got, it's a little difficult to see I guess, but I've got the curved front and the curved back with tabs to hold everything in place. So when I cut this, it should work. And now I'm just going to go ahead and show you the tool paths, and we'll cut this out. I'm cutting away the waste on the front, the rough cut. And for the rough cut, I'm just using a big 1/2-inch bit. And now I'm doing the finish cut with a 1/16 inch ball nose, really small. And I use a 1/16 inch ball nose because this particular piece has a lot of detail, and you'll see that more later on when we do the bottom half. Now I'll cut the back because it's got to have the curve as well, and I'm just using big 1/2-inch bits for this. And you can see now that I've got the whole piece cut with tabs in place that I'll have to cut through with a saw and clean it up. But when I do, I'll have just the sun with the rays and the top of the cross and the top of the mountains. Now this blank was not quite thick enough for the entire piece. As a matter of fact, the little top of the sun kind of stuck up out of there, so I had to glue on an extra little block of wood onto that before I cut the front. So now I'm going to work on the bottom part, and this I think was like 17 inches tall, so it's a pretty large piece. A lot of detail in the elk here, and that's why I had to use the 1/16 inch ball nose bit. But you can see the tabs on there, and it's got the curve, and essentially it's going to be cut the same way that I just cut the top piece. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and rough out the back. And it's important to leave plenty of material on the sides to support the piece when I flip it over and cut the front. So now I'm cutting the front. First cuts are just to get rid of some of the waste because the bit goes so deep you don't want to go and hit the collet on the wood, so I have to cut out a little bit ahead of time. Now I'm doing rough cuts. You can start to see the elk form. Okay, we're pretty much roughed out there, and now I'm coming in with the 16th inch ball nose, cutting the detail, really important around those elk. That's one of the reasons I use the 16th, so I can get the antlers and so forth to really be well defined. So now we're finishing up the finish cutting on the front. We've already got the back cut, so we can go ahead and do the cutout using a 1/4 inch bit. And now all I have to do is cut through those tabs, and I'll have the bottom piece. You can see I've got the curve on the front and the curve on the back. So when I get that cut out, along with the top piece, I can glue them together and we will be done. Now, the altar piece is a whole nother story. This is big. This had to be done in 4 sections actually. You can see the mountains, you can see the knot for the Trinity, and you can see the lavender. And one of the problems I had here, and by the way, this is just to show you that it's flat right now. I've got to still do the curvature on it. But one of the problems was how to support all those lavenders. If I cut through all those things, they're going to be pretty weak. And so I really had to think about that. What I ended up deciding to do was to actually veneer 4 layers of veneer onto the back of this. And those 4 layers of veneer would come to, with the glue, about 90 thousandths of an inch thick. So a little under 1/8 of an inch thick. And when I actually cut through the lavender, I just make sure I don't cut too far into the veneer. I wanted to cut about 10 thousandths or 10 or 15 thousandths into the veneer, and that way when you look through the stalks of lavender, you'd actually see oak veneer, and you'd think you're seeing the surface of the actual altar, but in fact you're seeing this oak veneer that I had to add. So essentially on the back, I was replacing a 90 thousandths inch part of the original cherry with 90 thousandths of oak veneer, and I glued 2 layers of the veneer in the vertical direction and then the back 2 layers in the horizontal direction. The idea being that I wanted to have good strength in both directions, and when I cut through on the front, I wanted to be cutting into vertical grain veneer so it would look just like the underlying veneer on the front of the curved surface of the altar, if that makes any sense to you. And if you look closely, you can kind of see how that back is inset into the piece by 90 thousandths, and the entire surface is 90 thousandths inset from what it would have otherwise been if I had not inserted that extra margin. So with the back cut, I go ahead and then cut the front, or simulate the cut, because remember, what I'm actually going to end up doing is making this in 4 panels because it's just such a large piece. And but just to show you how this works, I'll cut through the whole thing, and there's the finished cut. Now in this one I'm only using a 1/8 inch ball nose, because believe it or not, the detail on the lavender is not as great as the detail I had on the elk on the last piece. So there you can see the full cut through there. And I'm curved on the back and in the front. And we're recessed to 90 thousandths of an inch. So theoretically this is working. Okay, now I'll go ahead and show you how I cut this into quarters. I took the full model and just basically made 4 quarters of the thing and put tabs on to hold it to the material, just like, or to hold it to the frame just like normal. But if I cut these 4 quarters, I can later then glue them together. Remember, on that lavender part, you're not looking through and seeing air on the other side. You're seeing actually the bottom of the, or the top of that veneer layer that I put on there. So it'll make a very stiff unit. So here's the cutout. I'm not showing the tool this time. It's a little faster if I don't do that. But I'm cutting through. I just cut the rough. And now I'm cutting the finish. Now I'm cutting the back. In fact, what I actually did to make this, I cut the back, then I veneered in the vacuum bag, and then I came back and cut the front. So I'm showing you things a little bit out of order here, but you'll get the idea when you see the later videos, clips of the actual construction. And there we go. I've got tabs there that all I have to do is go saw through and clean up, and this piece will fit together with the matching right and lower left and lower right pieces.